COVID-19 has shaken the world right down to local communities, families and friends. And in this shaking, we've actually seen that on and off screen, that young and old have actually stepped up, they've stepped out to lead. Our key workers became our frontline leaders. If we take our Captain Tom, if we take Anne-Marie Duplat, who created the Clap for Carers. Our parents became teachers, our children became bakers. And what this has done, this pandemic has actually shone a light on what leadership really is. In fact, what it always was, stripped of title and status and power. It's actually much more human and accessible than we think. Pre-COVID, leadership development was a multi-billion industry right across the world. And yet, despite the multi-billion pound investment, it was actually very hard to see great leadership visibly in the public square. And whether it was the unethical behaviour of CEOs or football managers, or even the double standards of our political leaders, the failure and the disappointment dominated our headlines. This pandemic has actually shown that people follow people, not positions or status or power. And I believe it's time for what John Maxwell calls the LeaderSHIFT. It's time to shift how we think and how we practice strong leadership. I'm a professor of leadership, so I research and I write and I teach and I work with business leaders across a range of sectors. And while my research has formed a lot of how I understand of leadership, it has actually been socially constructed from my own personal experience. You see, I'm the eldest of 7 siblings. And if I could show you a photograph, you would see there's a striking physical resemblance across us. But actually, we're completely different. We're very unique in terms of our personalities, a real alchemy, as my father would say, of introverts and extroverts. But regardless, each one of us taking a very different career path, I have witnessed very proudly as the eldest, equality in leadership strength. So whether it is the school teacher to the stay-at-home mum, the sales to the engineer, whether it is the church leader and coffee barista, right down to the personal trainer, each one have stepped up. They have stepped out in their world, inspiring hope and changing lives. Sometimes on a stage for many to see, and sometimes simply in their garden with an audience of one. Sometimes it has been easy, but more often it's been really hard. It was about 18 months ago, and I was struggling to make sense of an unexpected illness. And at this time, I actually experienced this fundamental shift and how I understood how leadership actually worked. You see, leadership, in terms of all of the great debates, has been the birthright, the privilege of the firstborn in the family, or it has been a special ingredients combined together to create something quite unique. But I discovered this. Leadership is a muscle. It is actually something we all have, regardless of our age, our context, and our geography. And what I found from my research and from what I saw around me was actually there was a direct correlation between strength and influence, and actually how the leader exercised the muscle. Beauty is very much like titles, only skin deep. True, strong leadership is built from the inside out. And I want to tell you why and how. So it was Christmas 2018. It had been an incredibly successful year for me. I was settling well into my new role as provost. I had just completed a huge civic engagement project over the year. We had 150 events. We had over 20,000 people attend at those events. And personally, we had just moved house. I'm a working mum of 4 children, so at that time, my youngest was 2. Right through, my daughter had moved primary school, my son studying his A-levels, and my eldest had just gone to university. And I tell you all of this not to impress you with any superwoman powers that I have, because there is no soot under this dress, but I tell you this to give you the context of the cost of over-exercising the leadership muscle. You see, I woke up. I couldn't move my body. I was completely fatigued in terms of my mind and my body. And I felt very much like Bilbo Baggins when, at the opening scene of Lord of the Rings, he said, I feel thin, stretched, like butter, over far too much bread. You see, as a leader, and for maybe some of you that are listening, we take on too much bread. We take on more than we should, and we take on more than we could. And for me, the revelation was, I was addicted to progress, and I just couldn't help myself. So what I found was that as I was unpacking this, I realized, like all good strength programs, what was I missing? I was missing the incredible and actually life and death ingredient of rest and recovery. And what I experienced through that was I knew I had to make some shifts. And I want to tell you about a few of those shifts. You see, I never thought that my research would actually cross paths with my youngest sister, the personal trainer, the fitness expert, but it has. And it has been an incredible journey of revelation for me. And I want to share that with you, 3 shifts. I want to share with you the mental shift, the habit shift, and the resistance shift. So the mental shift. Number 1, introducing the mind-muscle connection. You see, before you embark on any fitness program, you must get your brain in gear. So I'm talking about making sure you have the right environmental conditions, looking at sleep, water, food, and even stress. And what happens in the world that we actually work in is we are so busy. We are so distracted. There are so many things competing for our attention. We just survive. We are basically in a autopilot mode. And what happens is it's hard to actually make and affect that real personal change. So for me, what did I have to do? When I went back to work, I knew I had to shift my mind. I had to say from saying basically yes to everything and doing everything from being much more selective, doing what really mattered and saying no a heck of a lot more. So things like pre-scheduling my life to 80% allows me for that unexpected event like a sick child or a new project or emergency issue in work, not to overwhelm me. Number 2, the habit shift. So what I'm talking about here is I'm talking about behavioral patterns. I'm talking about our practices. You see, what you do daily, your habits, determines who you become permanently. So in the world of exercise, we all know that the frequency and consistency of exercise is actually what grows the muscle, not a one-off session in the gym. I don't know if anyone has ever been to the gym and done a huge big session when you're unfit, but it's painful. I mean, it's agony for days, and there is no net gain. You see, there's no overnight fix to leadership strength. There is no one quick solution. It is about actually understanding what you're naturally good at and what you need to work on. So for me, I knew I had to speak less and listen more. You see, I had got some feedback from my husband, the executive coach, who was very gracious in giving me that. And I knew that was a habit that I was not good at, that I hadn't developed into my daily life. So once I had switched on and I realized I needed to make this change, I couldn't believe how often I had to resist the urge to speak, resist the urge to actually interrupt. And it's amazing how those practices and how that habit develops, and by no means a finished article, but certainly consistency compounds. And finally, number 3, the resistance shift. You see, many people want change, but not always to change. We are hardwired to resist change. We're hardwired because our brain craves predictability. Our emotions desire stability. So what happens is we actually fear those things we can't control or predict. And that sense of certainty that we want to hold on keeps us stuck. So why? Why is it that change is so hard? Why is it painful? Because it is change, and In that sense of uncomfortable, in that pain, is actually where we do our greatest learning and where we develop our greatest strength. In many ways, you could say I've been to the gym of adversity many times in my career so far. I've experienced times of loneliness, times of unpopularity, times of testing, and times of failure. As a self-proclaimed perfectionist and with having some tendencies around high achievement, I knew I had to change my relationship with failure. Because we all need failure. Failure not the ultimate result, but the process of failure, because that's where we learn about ourselves. And I have to tell you that I didn't get my Viva the first time I did my PhD. I experienced failure as a head of school. And even now in my role as provost, things don't always go well, and I have to pivot and change. But I am incredibly thankful. I'm incredibly thankful for the learning that has built in, because it's made me be the leader I am today. Try being thankful. That is the real pivot in turning the resistance into strength. So as society navigates recovery from this crisis, I believe we are recovering the true meaning of leadership. And this pandemic has proved that people follow people, not position or power. We don't want superhuman leaders. We want human leaders, strong from the inside out. Let's not wait for another crisis to learn this lesson, and let's not revert back to stereotypes. If the biggest ability in leadership is actually responsibility, well, there are no excuses. It's on me and it's on you. And if you want to be the change and lead the change, then you need to make the leader shift. Thank you.